I'm making that. Hi everyone, and welcome to Knitkatpodcast and episode 6 of the Knitkatpodcast. I'm Kat and I like to chat about knitting, spinning and dyeing. If you're already subscribed, welcome back. Thank you for joining me again. And if you're new, welcome. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and if you do, please remember to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more. And if you'd like to connect with me outside of YouTube, I'm on Ravelry and Instagram as Knitkatpodcast. And I also have a blog at knitkatpodcast.com and a Facebook page called Knitkatpodcast. So today is a really special podcast because I am hosting a giveaway. So I just the other day reached 500 subscribers, which I can hardly believe. And so I wanted to thank you guys all for supporting this channel. And the prize is really beautiful and I'm really excited to show you. So keep watching and I will talk about the giveaway a little bit later on in this episode. I also wanted to say thank you so much for those of you who watched my first video about how I knitted my wedding dress for my wedding back in 2016. It has had a really amazing response from all of you, and I'm just really thankful and humbled by that. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it, and if you haven't watched it, I will put a card up above so you can find it. So I'm planning to make another video to show you actually the dress 4.5 years later, and I'll put it on and we'll talk about what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it and things that kind of didn't go to plan as well in the making and also in the wearing process. And because several people have asked, I'm also going to do a third video 2 weeks after that one to talk about why I decided to knit my own wedding dress. And so yeah, I hope that you guys enjoy those wedding dress videos. So now on to today's podcast, and I usually like to start this podcast with a little bit of a life update. And yeah, so things are going pretty well for our little family down here in Tasmania, although I am feeling a little bit sorry for myself. I just have lots of little aches and pains and niggles, and if I look like one side of my mouth is kind of droopy, or if I kind of slur my words, it's because I've injured the inside of my mouth. It's getting better, but it's uncomfortable. It kind of feels as if, you know, when you get a shot at the dentist to numb your mouth and like feels fat, like your lip feels fat, feels like that. And it does make speaking a little bit difficult. So I hope that you'll be able to understand me today. It's not bothering me as much today as it has been. But yeah, just lots of little, my shoulder hurts, my hip hurts, and just feeling old. But today was a good day though, because the weather was gorgeous. My husband put in, so I'm in my craft room at the moment, which my husband built. It's also a library, that's why there's books and stuff. My husband built, it's in our backyard, and he had to do the stormwater, like the guttering for this library. He finished this library 6 months ago, but he hadn't gotten around to doing the stormwater stuff. So he did that today, and he had our 3-year-old girl with him. And then while he was doing that, I took my little baby son to the city, and we had a little bit of a shopping spree. I went to my favourite vegetarian restaurant and got lunch there. I don't think I've been there in like a couple of years, and went to Spotlight and got some yarn, and yeah, had a good day. And yeah, so it's the school holidays at the moment, so my husband has been home. He's a teacher, so he's been home, and as I record this, it's the Friday. It's actually the last day of the school holidays, so he's been doing lots of work around the house, like doing the stormwater stuff, and so that's been really nice. It's been really nice to have him home as well. And my daughter, my 3-year-old, has started ballet lessons. So she's had 3 lessons so far, and that's really good. I think that will be really good for her. I actually did ballet myself for 9 seasons. So between the ages of 5 and nearly 14, I did ballet, and that was like I enjoyed it, but I'm not like desperate for her to do it. But she is really interested in ballet, so. And there's a class nearby, so I thought that we'd give it a go, and I think that it will be really good for her. It's very low pressure. It's for toddlers, so she's 3.5. And there's no concert or anything. They just kind of put on tiaras and tutus and stuff, and it's good. And I think it will teach her to follow instructions, and also it'll be good for her motor skills as well. So I'm really excited about that, and I sit in on all the lessons, as do all the other parents. And my husband came to the last one, which is nice because he's home, so he can do that, and that was really fun as well. And she also has a couple of her little friends who are in the ballet class as well, so that'll be good. She'll get to spend a little bit more time with them too. And so she's had 3 lessons of ballet so far, and kind of really poor timing. About a week before the first one, I started getting like a sniffly nose, and I was like, oh no, like pandemic. Like, it was so mild, but because of the pandemic, they ask, at least here, they ask you to be tested if you have any flu-like symptoms. And so I thought, yes, I should do that and get tested. And it's not pleasant. Didn't enjoy the test very much. So if you haven't had it before, they swab the back of your throat, and then they swab both of your nostrils, like right to the back. Not a fan. You have to sit really still, and I think it's so that they don't accidentally hurt you. But it still hurt anyway. I thought I was sitting pretty still. Kind of on the drive home, I felt like I'd been crying. Like, you know that feeling, hard to explain, but like that feeling like you've just been crying, or you've been crying earlier that day. That's what it felt like. And then for about a day afterwards, it kind of felt like I had a blood nose, like I could sort of taste blood in my mouth. So that wasn't very nice. And I talked about it to a relative of mine who's a doctor, and she's had the test as well a couple of times. And she said it was really unpleasant, and that other similar tests are not as unpleasant as that. So she actually said that they have started introducing a new protocol for children if they get the COVID test, so that it's not as painful for them, the poor things. So anyway, I had the coronavirus test. Obviously, I tested negative because Tasmania actually hasn't had a new case in a couple of months, which is really good for us. So if I had tested positive, that would have been in the news. But I don't have coronavirus, which is good, and I'm very grateful for that. And it also meant that my daughter didn't miss her first ballet class. So yeah, so there's that. I think that's all for the life update. Let's talk about my knitting and my spinning and all of that fun stuff. So I've got lots of things to share with you. I actually have no knitting works in progress, which is rare. But I have a very big dyeing and spinning work in progress, which will become a knitting work in progress. So that is, I'll get to that at the end. Let's start with a knitting finished object, which is not mine, but it is very exciting. So it's this, and my little girl made it. I did not think that she had the concentration to do any kind of knitting at all. But she is very interested in knitting, and she has this book which I bought a while ago about like teaching kids how to knit, and it's pitched at kids a lot older than her, but she does like it when I read it to her. And there was one day a couple of weeks ago, and she just kept asking me to cast on. She's like, can you do a slip knot? And can you cast on? And so I would cast on using just the backwards loop method, because that's what the book says, onto a needle, when she liked counting the stitches and stuff. And so I thought, let's give French knitting a go. And I know, like, French knitting seems to be the term for it these days, but when I was growing up, we actually called it a tomboy. So I made her a very hastily made French knitting dolly out of a toilet roll, and then popsicle sticks taped around the outside, which is what they were like back in my day. And I taught her to French knit, and this is what she made. I'm so proud of her. She did a really brilliant job. She used her fingers. We tried with a crochet hook, but fingers were best for her, and she did most of this herself. I did the casting on and off, and I did a few rows in between, but she did most of it herself. And this is done on just some old stash wool that I had that someone gave me, which we dyed together with blue food colouring. And she loves to dye with me as well. And if you're on my Instagram, you'll have seen a picture of this before, and it had googly eyes stuck to it. It ended up with 8 eyes. I think on Instagram it's only up to 4. But it's a snake. This is a snake. But anyway, it's lost the eyes at some point. But I still really wanted to show you guys this. She hasn't done any more knitting since then, but I hope that she does some more because she's done a really good job. And yeah, I'm so proud of her. So now on to some other finished object news, and I have made some socks for me. So you guys will have seen, if you have watched my podcast before, I bought some yarn from Novita. It was a superwash wool, Novita Nali, wool and polyamide blend. And it was white, and I dyed it with Jacquard acid dyes. And it was the first time that I had used a commercial acid dye before. I've done like natural dyeing with like leaves and stuff, and I've done food coloring dyeing before, but it was the first time I'd actually sprung for the like proper stuff. And so I dyed some sock blanks with that, and I also dyed some self-striping yarn with just on a long skein and then dip dyed in. And that's what this yarn is, and as you can see here. And yeah, and it was also my first go at using the Fish Lips Kiss heel, and I did them toe up with a Turkish cast on, only 48 stitches around. It's a 6-ply yarn, so a little bit thicker than what I'm used to for socks. And yeah, toe up, Turkish cast on, Fish Lips Kiss heel, and then I did a tubular bind off or cast off for the top. It's 2x2 rib, and then I did a tubular cast off. And yeah, and as you can see, I didn't break the yarn and do a different color for the heel, and so that means that it did interrupt the patterning on the front. I did that partly out of laziness, partly because I kind of wanted to see if there were any cool organic patterns that came up with the self-striping, and there kind of was. It was pretty cool actually. So this is the first one that I did, and you can see that it barely interrupted the striping. This is where it was interrupted, and it just added an extra row of purple. But it it sort of, the very tip of the heel is purple, and sort of where I did like the short rows up to the edge, that's purple too on both sides. And then we've got pink either side. So I think that one looked really cool. And these ones should have been more or less identical, because I did start them both on the start of a purple section, and I counted the rounds, so they should have been identical, but something was up with that. So this one, the interruption is more obvious there, and it's sort of, this heel also looks cool, but it's different to the other one, so it's sort of half pink and half purple. And so I think what I must have done is either it's just a natural variation in the stripes, or I miscounted the rounds, which I think I probably did. This one seems a little bit shorter, but I don't really care because they're for me, and I haven't even blocked them, and I think that I probably won't block them because I just want like good everyday socks. And yeah, so I haven't worn these like around the house yet, but I have put them on and they're so soft. So I'm excited about that. I was a little bit nervous about wool. I don't really like the feel of sheep's wool, but this has softened up a lot as I dyed it, and you know, it got washed. And also on my feet, the texture doesn't bother me as much, and it actually feels really, really nice. So that's really cool. And I'm excited to wear these, and I will knit up the sock blanks at some point as well as socks for me too. So it's nice. I don't knit for myself very often, so it's nice to have something special that I've made for myself. And in other news, also down the kind of the dyeing yarn lane, I have played my game of Will It Dye. So in my last podcast episode 5, I talked about that. So I bought this big bag of wool or yarn from an op shop or a secondhand, like a charity shop. If you're not in Australia and you don't know what I'm talking about, that's what an op shop is. And it was this huge bag of yarn. It's all white and it's all roughly fingering weight, although there is a little bit of variation, and there's no ball bands or anything. So I thought that I would play a game of Will It Dye and see if I would dye the balls, just a little section of each one, with an acid dye. And so if it is a protein fibre, then it will take up the dye, and if it's acrylic, it won't at all. And so I played that game. Also, someone in my last podcast episode, I think it was Jennifer, commented to say that if you put wool in bleach, then it will dissolve. And she also suggested the burn test. I don't think I will do the burn test, but I thought I have to try the bleach test because that sounds really cool. And so I did that as well. So anyway, so I've done 5 of the balls. They're here. So what I've done, and I'm going to do a blog post about this, by the way. I've been neglecting my blog, but I'm totally going to do a blog post about this experiment. So what I did was I got these, I made little ball bands. Oh, I don't know if you can see. Let me see if I can make it work. So excuse my poor handwriting, but I've numbered them all. So this is yarn number 1. And then I've got a little willet dye and a little table here of bleach and dye. So, and I've got dissolved, didn't dissolve, dyed, or didn't dye. And so if it's a protein fibre, it should dissolve in bleach and it should also dye with the acid dye that I was using. And if it's not a protein fibre, so if it's acrylic or cellulose, then it shouldn't dissolve and it shouldn't dye. So this is yarn number 1, and it didn't dye and it didn't dissolve. So that is, I'm pretty sure this is 100% acrylic. And then balls number 2, 3, and 5, I'm pretty sure are animal fibre. They dyed and they dissolved. And this one here, I said in my last episode that I didn't think any of them were cellulose fibres, but then I pulled this out and I was like, actually, does seem a bit like cotton. And so what happened was it didn't dissolve at all in the wool, in the bleach, but it didn't take up the dye well, and it didn't do it in a streaky way such that it would make me think that it was like a wool blend. What it sort of slightly took on the dye. It took on the dye more than the acrylic one did, but not nearly as well as the wool ones did. And I don't think it's a matter of like one is superwash and one isn't. I think that this is a cellulose fibre, and it just took on just a tiny bit of the dye. So I will put a picture on the screen of the little lengths of yarn that I dyed. What I did basically was I was dyeing something else with the acid dyes, which I'll show you later on. But I had this dye bath ready. I just took a small length of the yarns dry and I dipped them in, held them for 5 seconds, and then took them out and rinsed them. And yeah, and it was pretty interesting to see. So I'll put the picture on the screen. And what was really cool was the bleach experiment. That was really, really cool because it absolutely disintegrated the wool. I actually took a little bit of sheep's fleece for one of my spinning projects and put that in some bleach. So what I did was I had these little disposable plastic shot glasses, and I had them all kind of lined up. And I put some sheep's fleece in that I knew was sheep's fleece, and it was just gone. After like 10 minutes, it was gone. And that's what happened, and it sort of bubbles, and then it just sort of falls apart, and then it's just, you can't see it at all. And so yeah, those 3 yarns that I'm pretty sure are wool did that. The others didn't. The acrylic one didn't do anything at all. The cotton one like had a couple of bubbles, but I'm not sure. It could have been just from trapped air. So yeah, that was really, really fun. I really enjoyed that little experiment. And interesting to see how the 2 different methods did kind of match up with each other to confirm what I think that the fibres were made of. So on to another knitting finished object, and this is really, really cute. So I've got this little hat here, and ta-da! Isn't that cute? Someone on a Facebook page shared their version of this pattern, and I was like, I'm making that. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I'll link it down below. It's called Abracadabra, a Rabbit in a Hat by Sandra Ronca. And this is actually the second one that I've made. This one is for my little girl. And the first one that I made has already been given away to the recipient, but it was made for my little nephew who just turned 2. So, and his is the same, but it didn't have the ribbon. So I'll put a picture on the screen there. But yeah, this is super, super cute. My daughter really likes it. And yeah. I did kind of take some liberties with the pattern because I didn't really like the way that the ears were. So I did my own thing with the ears, and I made the head and the hat a little bit bigger. And this little guy I knitted in over the course of like a day and a half, like a bit over a day, very, very quick. I did a lot of it walking, so I would take my knitting for a walk. I also did these socks while walking, because a lot of this was done just plain stocking stitch in the round, so it's great. I could get a bit of exercise, get a little bit of me time, and also get some knitting done, so that was great. Fun fact, I actually used to have a white rabbit who was given to us by a magician because she didn't fit in the hat anymore, and her name was Snow White. And yeah, so I used to own a magician's rabbit. So that's the little rabbit in the hat. I think it's pretty cute, and my daughter really likes it as well. So let's talk about my really, really big project that I am doing. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I have a sheep's fleece, which I'm in the process of turning into a Victorian era inspired coat for my daughter. And that's part of Wool and Vine's history make-along that I'm taking part in. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. The pattern is called the Victorian Hooded Coat by Jenny Snedeker. I'm sorry, I may not have pronounced that name properly, but I'll link that below as well. It's available on Ravelry. So last I saw you guys, I was picking the fleece. So I'd washed it and I was sort of picking it and pre-carding it, just to get out as much junk as possible and to open up the fibre. I have finished that stage and I have dyed it and I have started spinning. So interesting. I finished all of the pre-carding and I had this nice fibre that was spinnable, and I weighed it and it came out to about 1 kilo. So I needed about 200 grams left aside to be white. I was going to do 400 grams in light blue and 400 grams in dark blue, so that I can do some fun stuff with colours, which I won't go into too much detail about yet. But so I took 400 grams of that wool and I did what I was hoping to be a dark blue batch. And so I used the Jacquard acid dyes again. I used 6 grams of dye, I used 4 grams of blue and 2 grams of violet, and I made my dye bath up, put the acid in and everything, soaked the wool, put it in, and it's quite a lot of wool for the stock pot I have. That's my dedicated dyeing stock pot. Even though the stock pot is huge, 400 grams is still quite a bit. Anyway, put it all in. I didn't move the wool much at all, and I knew that was going to give me quite a tonal batch of wool, and I was fine with that because I'm going to card it all up and it would all blend. But I wanted overall a dark blue wool, and the dye completely exhausted out of the water, so all of the dye was soaked up into the wool. I took it out, I dried it. It was good. Like, there were some bits that were quite light and there's some bits that were quite dark, but I thought that's fine. Let's do the light blue lot. I used half as much dye, same proportions, but half as much dye, and dyed it. Again, didn't really move the wool because I didn't want it to felt, and took it out, dried it, and both batches looked pretty much the same. And I don't really know why that is. I either weighed the dye powder wrong or I weighed the wool wrong, and I think I probably weighed the dye powder wrong because the scales that I use to weigh my dye powder are just like ordinary kitchen scales, so I think that they didn't really have as much tolerance for just like 1 gram sort of increments. I'll have to get like jewelry scales or something for if I want to be more accurate. Anyway, so I had this 800 grams of wool that all looked, it was all, you know, various shades of blue, but I wanted 2 different depths of shade, and I didn't really get that. So what I did was I took, because they were very tonal in themselves, each batch, I separated out all of the light bits from one batch and the dark bits, and then I did the same for the other lot, and so I had a pile of light bits of wool and dark bits of wool. But the variation, like the distinction, still was too subtle for me. So what I did then was I took the dark wool and I dyed it again in blue. And this time I kind of just winged it with the powders. I'm not sure if I even weighed it. And I moved the wool a little bit more just to get a more even covering. Like I say, I wasn't really too bothered about it being tonal, but the only issue is that I wanted overall one batch to be darker than the other, but it wasn't really. So so this is where I kind of messed up again. It's not disastrous, but what happened was, so I moved the wool a little bit more than I would usually, and then I was doing my will it dye experiment at the same time, and I lost track, and I think that the water got a little bit too hot and moved a little bit too much, and it didn't felt, but I think that it threatened to felt. I think it started to seize up. Still definitely spinnable. It's okay. And like it comes apart and everything. It'll come up fine in the carding process. But it's just like a little bit more wiry. Just a tiny bit. And I know it's the sort of thing that I think will bother me, but once it's all carded and spun up, I don't think I'll really notice. But anyway, this is the dark blue batch, and you can see it's pretty, fairly evenly dyed. And I haven't carded the dark blue lot yet. I've carded the white lot, and I'm spinning that, and I'll show you that in a minute. And I've started carding the light blue lot. So this is a little bundle of the light blue compared with the dark blue, so there is enough variation there that I'm happy with. But before that, the distinction wasn't big enough for me. Anyway, so what I've been doing is I have a drum carder. It's an ancient drum carder, and it's not the best for preparing wool for spinning. I bought it from a felter, so they don't need as fine a teeth per inch as a spinner does, and it's decades old. When you use carders, you want like 54 teeth per inch, 72 teeth per inch sort of thing. This is about 20, and the company I can't find online anywhere, so I think that it's like a very old carder. It seems old, and it does work okay, but you do have to be quite nice to it, and you have to put the fibre through twice and go really slowly and stuff. So that's what I've been doing. And as you can see, hopefully, I'll try to get it to show up for you, but I have been carding in a little bit of like Firestar nylon in. Yeah, you can see it's kind of sparkly, just a tiny bit. And I've got blue. I'm doing some like a blue and white Firestar into the light blue one, and then I've got a pink and purple one that I'm going to blend into the dark blue one, so that'll be cool. And what this is I've taken a bat and I just drafted it out by hand just a tiny bit and rolled it up, and as I'm spinning I am using my knitting needle gauge as a diz and dizzing out the fibre just to make it consistent for me. And so this is some of the wool that I've spun up. This is the white, and it's, I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but there it is there. I'm doing the singles at the moment, and it's good. It's a good learning experience for me. So just a bit of backstory. I used to spin back home in like 2011 through to the start of 2013, back home in Adelaide. And then when I moved to Tasmania, I didn't bring my wheel with me. And so I would sometimes spin when I went home to visit, but not even always every time then. But for the most part, for the last 7 years, I haven't been spinning. But earlier this year, actually on my 30th birthday, someone gave me a spinning wheel, and it's a mystery brand. There's no labels or anything. I can't find it online. And so it does limit me for parts and stuff, and it's a double drive, which I was not used to using. My previous spinning wheel was an Ashford Traditional, which is single drive. And yeah, it's a learning experience because I'm going to do a cabled yarn, which is where you get plied yarns and then you ply them together. And in order to have a little bit of loft to the yarn as a finished product, and so it's not like rope-like, you need to underspin the singles. And I have done cabled yarns before, but they were a pretty big, like a bulky weight sort of yarn, and it was easier to underspin that sort of that sort of weight. But I'm doing what's going to end up being a worsted weight yarn, so I have to spin the singles pretty thin. I actually have a little tool that was a printable off of Etsy to help me with making sure that I've got the width right. I'll link that below if you're interested. but it's a challenge to underspin a thin singles, so it's good for me to learn, I think. And my wheel has 3 different sized sort of pulleys, but I think that it probably would be better if I had one that was just like a tiny bit bigger, but it's fine, and I'm getting better at it as I go. So hopefully that'll, it'll spin up really nice. It is underspun, but it's hard to get like it consistent. And you know, usually when I'm doing just a 2-ply yarn, I can put quite a bit of spin in it, and it sort of smooths over any little slubs that I have. But when I'm underspinning, it's a bit less forgiving. So that's good. That's good fun, and I'm really enjoying spinning. It's nice, so relaxing. So I'm really loving that. Hey everyone, it's the next day now. I just thought I would cut in very briefly with this little bit of footage before I go back to the other stuff, because I filmed all of that stuff yesterday, and then I realised that I had forgotten to show you some library books that I got out recently, and just enjoying looking at them, so I thought that you might enjoy them too. So the first one I will show you is a bit of an odd one out because it's the only knitting pattern book, and this stood out to me because I have borrowed it before, like 10 years ago, like just after I started to knit, and it had a different title then. It was called Aware Knits. And so this, I guess it might be a different country's version or something, but the copy that I borrowed before was called Aware Knits, and I have knitted several things from that pattern book. And so this stood out to me because the cover was the same, so I borrowed it, and it looks to be exactly the same book. But it's called Knit Purl Save the World, and it's all knitting and crochet, and it's just like eco-friendly patterns, and I have made several things from it in the past. I have made that little dress before. I made these booties, which they're called Rebooty, and this one calls for recycled yarn. I think that when I made it I didn't use a recycled yarn, but there's lots of kind of eco-friendly fibres using recycled yarn. This one here, I haven't made this, but that is recycled yarn, and it explains how to dye it yourself. So there's Plan, the plastic bag yarn to make this little lunch satchel there that's made of plastic bags. There's jute stuff. This is made of newspaper yarn. I haven't made that one, but that's pretty cool. There's something else that I've made. I have made this little crochet rabbit. I've made 2 of those before. Very cute and very easy because I'm not a super skilled crocheter. There's also a washcloth. I made one of those before. Simple cabled and lace washcloth. It's really cool. I kind of just got it to look through. I often will borrow library books just to look through them and not necessarily make stuff from. But I have made things in the past using this pattern book. And all the other books that I have borrowed from my local library are spinning books. And I'm really enjoying the libraries being open again. I love using my local library. So if any of these catch your fancy, look up at your local library if they are available. If they are not available there, or if your libraries are still closed, I will link below where you can buy these books. This one is called Spin, Die, Stitch by Jennifer Claydon. I haven't looked through this in great detail, but it has lots of really basic skills like how to join a new piece of fibre to your spinning, how to ply on a drop spindle, and things about how different spinning wheels, and a few little patterns as well using your own hand spun yarn. So I haven't looked in too much detail at that one, nor have I looked too much detail at this one, which is the Ashford Book of Hand Spinning, but this is beautiful, and it's very kind of thorough. It sort of goes through different sorts of fibres, how to spin, a bit of information about the animals that they come from. It reminds me a bit of a book that I own called The Intentional Spinner by Judith Mackenzie McEwen, in terms of the amount of detail that it goes into. Like, it's looking at the kind of close-up illustrations of what the yarns look like as they're spun, if they're woolen or worsted and stuff. There's that one. These 2 here I have borrowed before, but I like them so much that I've borrowed them again. And so Spin Art is what I'm using as a bit of a guide for the cabled yarn that I'm doing at the moment. And it's pretty cool. it's got a DVD that comes with it, and it's by JC Boggs, and it's all kinds of textured yarns or art yarns. And she goes through, she sort of explains certain details that other books don't, like in terms of you know, what kind of spin you're aiming for and how close to hold it to the orifice and stuff. Some books talk about that, some of them don't, but it's very helpful for me as someone who's sort of a self-taught, not super advanced spinner. Very useful. And this one as well is Spinning and Dyeing Yarn by Ashley Martineau, and this is a really good sort of introduction to spinning, and my husband and I have actually used these instructions for making drop spindles using old CDs. We did that once as a date night, made some drop spindles and did some spinning together, and some, yeah, really kind of beautiful, inspiring pictures as well, interviews from yarn dyers and spinners, and yeah, so that one's kind of just for me to look through again and be inspired by, because I have looked through that one before. And I like Ashley Martineau. She used to have a company called Novo Fiber Arts. I'm not sure if she's still got that, but she's on she's got a presence online. She's got a YouTube channel and she sells spinning wheels now, I think. So but yeah, she's got this really nice book. I think it's a good introduction to spinning. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that, all my little collection of library books, because I'm excited about looking through those, and I thought that you might enjoy them too. So I will link below if you want to buy them yourself, but if you can borrow them from the library, I would recommend that, because we need to support our libraries at the moment, as they are you know, they've had to close and they're only just starting to reopen again. Okay, I just got interrupted by my baby waking up, but I'm back and I think that was all of the crafty news that I wanted to share with you guys. So let's talk about my giveaway. So I just really wanted to thank you all for supporting this channel. I'm just so grateful to you. So I decided to do this giveaway as a way to say thank you. And as some of you will remember, I live down in beautiful Tasmania in the south of Australia, and there are actually a lot of really talented fibre artists down here. So I wanted to showcase one of those artists with this giveaway. So I have here this lovely skein of yarn. It has been dyed by Sarah of Bombed Yarns, and she has a shop on Etsy. And she's an indie dyer. She does lots of interesting fibres, and she also does lots of different kinds of dyeing as well. She does some natural dyeing, and this yarn has been dyed on her eco base. So as you might remember, finding ethically sourced fibre, especially sheep's fibre, is extremely important to me. And this base that Sarah uses is from the White Gum Wool Farm, and it takes the welfare of its sheep very seriously. It's a very high priority for them, so I felt very comfortable buying this yarn on this base from Sarah. It is 100% superfine merino, non-superwash, 4-ply. It is in the colour Claret, which is this beautiful kind of wine red colour. And yeah, it's lovely. It is so soft. So I bought this yarn for you guys to give away, and when I ordered it, Sarah also put it inside this very sturdy Bombed Yarns project bag. And so if you win the giveaway, you will get this skein of yarn and also this project bag. So yeah, I'm really excited to give this away to somebody. And I will link down below the Etsy page for Bombed Yarns, and also the website for the White Gum Wool Farm, in case you want to check them out. So about the competition, how to win it. So it is a worldwide competition. I will put the full rules down below in the description. But basically, to enter, you need to be subscribed to this channel, and you also need to leave me a comment down below telling me what is the coolest fibre that you have ever knit with. So for me, it is the fibre from my pet rabbit, not Snow White, a different rabbit. His name was Cole. He was black, and it And so for over the course of 2 summers when he shed his coat, I collected his hair and then I spun it up and I knitted it into a toy rabbit. And I still have that rabbit, and kind of weirdly, a week after I finished knitting it, Cole died. So kind of strange, but I loved that rabbit. He was so friendly, and it's nice to kind of have a remembrance of him. And anyway, so to enter the competition, subscribe to this channel, tell me down below what is the coolest fibre that you have ever knitted with, and you could win. So I'm going to draw the winner on the 31st of July. So you have about a week and a half to enter. I'm going to use a random comment selector to select a winner. And then in my next podcast episode, so episode 7, I will announce the winner. So not next week. Next week I'm going to do another wedding dress video and I will remind you about this giveaway, but I won't announce the winner. But in 2 weeks' time, episode 7 of my podcast, I will announce the winner of the giveaway. So good luck everybody, and I'm excited to read about what is the coolest yarn that you have knit with. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I hope that I will see you next week for another wedding dress episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!